Secretary Rubio in the briefing room the other day, and what did you think?
Are you talking about his outfit?
Yeah, that's it.
I thought he looked very good in the outfit, sweatsuit. I don't know if I'd do it, but I thought he looked very good. I think he's outstanding. I thought he was great. I mean, I saw every word of it. I thought he was first.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the one and the only Awakener podcast, quite possibly the best podcast in the history of the world. If this is your first time listening to the show, you're going to be lost, and like I always say, you need to go to my website, theawakener.ca. That is one word, theawakener.ca. It is your best resource for finding out and discovering what is happening right now, and everything will make sense to you in the end when you fully understand all the avenues to what I explain on this website. It is literally, there's an all-out hidden war that is happening for the future of humanity. And not just the future of humanity, it's the future of this entire planet. It's the future of the Western world. It's the future of obviously you, your family, your kids, your relatives, and so on and so on. As you know, I don't do shows every single day. So if you're following and subscribing to this podcast and you're expecting daily updates, you're not going to get them. I run a business. Those of you who know me personally know that I'm extremely busy. I have zero free time. Right now, I probably had about 3 or 4 hours this week of free time, one of which I'm devoting to you by creating this podcast. I create this podcast and do this podcast because I love doing it, number one. And number two, when I go to all these people online and I see what they're talking about, honestly, nobody has any idea what they're talking about. That's kind of the common denominator. And that is really the reason that I do this. So back in 2014, I kind of had a grand awakening kind of personally, and I saw some things and I was like, wait a second, there's a giant war happening between the Western world and a communist conspiracy that is organizing with radical Islam against us. And I started to figure out what they were doing to us and how and the latest things. And I don't, ladies and gentlemen, talk about the latest updates. I'm not going to talk about this Hantavirus and how it's a giant distraction, because that's all this is. This is like, look at here, ladies and gentlemen, because something else is going on here. I try to talk about the something else that is going on here and to explain to you in far more depth than just a political battle. I explain to you the actual war and what is happening. And like I was like flabbergasted, absolutely flabbergasted that Donald Trump and his entire crew, basically almost everybody who was working with him, hopped on a plane and went over to China after everything that has happened. In the most brazen way, with Marco Rubio himself wearing, obviously, what happened in Venezuela with this guy being arrested, Maduro, and wearing his entire outfit and going on Air Force One and putting it on the internet, and we're heading over there. To me, everybody's trying to read into what is happening, and I will tell you exactly what happened on that China trip. You know what Trump and his crew did? They went over there and they sat down and they said, hey, well, we have no choice but to bring out the truth, what's going to happen in Iran, and there's going to be a giant war. And if you team up against us, there will be absolutely no China when we're finished with you. What is happening, ladies and gentlemen, is the truth is going to be revealed to the general population. That truth is that there is a hidden communist conspiracy that has embedded itself in the Western world. Primarily, like I've told you, George Soros and his organizations and his money and everything that has happened has literally taken over every avenue of the Western world and our governments. And now our governments are de facto working for a communist conspiracy, or in fact working for the Russians and Soviet influence. And the clarity of this is so obvious when you look at it, because the Soviets would have dreamed in 1965 and 1970 that everyone here in America and Canada and the Western world would be on the streets saying free Palestine. This would be like their biggest thing. With the funding of Yasser Arafat and everything with the PLO movement and everything that was created about Palestine with the Soviet creation, they could only fantasize and dream that the Western world would be on the streets voting for those who want to destroy them. It's amazing time to be alive. So realistically, what I told you is that there's going to be a giant war. Unfortunately, a lot of people have thought that there's going to be this giant peace coming up, and there might be a term of peace for a specific period of time, but nothing to do with obviously the regime that's controlling Iran right now. When this Iran war happened and started, I told you that this was going to be a long time. It's going to take quite some time. This is not going to be something that's quick and easy, and it's mainly because Iran is run by hardliners. And the situation that is happening there is far worse than anybody could possibly imagine. Now, I've talked about in detail how Iran's nuclear program has been aided, obviously, by the Soviets, has been aided by Russia, like I explained to you. And they have been kind of moving around and setting up a covert nuclear facility that was in Syria. And now we know that it's much worse, that possibly that there was a covert nuclear facility in Venezuela, which is why all this hantavirus is happening, because they want to keep people away and unfocused from this. Now, a couple years back, when Trump's first term, there was a giant strike on Syria. Now, at the time, Assad was gassing his people, and this is what was kind of fed to us on the news. And I speculated, and I talked about this on my previous shows, that realistically, I didn't believe that Trump struck Syria at that time to destroy any of these gas facilities like the media told us. I told everybody that I thought Trump was taking out the remnants of Syria's nuclear program, specifically the one that Israel bombed way back in 2004. And I kind of told you at the time that I didn't think that this program had ended fully, that it was still kind of operating. And realistically, Trump striking that was to completely finalize it and destroy it, so it was done for. And obviously, Iran, who was getting all this information from North Korea about how to create nuclear programs. So bear with me, everything North Korea gets, Iran gets a year later, and then Iran is giving it to Syria, and then obviously Iran is giving it to Venezuela. So this whole thing that's happening in Venezuela is my suspicions that there is a bigger nuclear program that was happening in Venezuela than we are led to believe. And this could even involve Cuba. And if you think about this, ladies and gentlemen, this is far worse than the Cuban Missile Crisis that happened in the 1960s when the Russians put nuclear weapons into Cuba. Imagine, like I told you before, that Iran was supplying uranium, etc., to Venezuela, and these missiles that were supposed to be shipped in from Russia were going to make it so that these countries, well, Venezuela, maybe even Cuba, we'll find out later, were going to be able to attack America with nuclear weapons. Far worse, ladies and gentlemen. So we have kind of like my theory on the show about what is happening, and I've kind of laid it out, and I've been like, well, like, how accurate do you think I am? And to be honest with you, it might actually be worse than I think it is, which is really kind of scary and really interesting, actually. A lot of people are caught up in this hantavirus thing, which is this giant distraction. And like I've told you before, don't buy into this. What you really need to understand, obviously, was Barack Obama's first term, the distribution of U.S. uranium over to Iran, and obviously the distribution of this uranium to other sources. Was it happening in Syria? Was it happening in Venezuela? And obviously Iran's nuclear program as well. So my theory, like I said, just going back a few minutes, was that Trump and his crew went over to China and they explained to everybody, well, you know what happened with the first time when COVID hit? You remember how Joe Biden was going to be indicted? And do you remember how COVID came out of your lab because you were directed to do so, and this caused all this mayhem just because Russia instructed you to do so? There's going to probably be a big war with Russia, and you better back off. So the future remains to be seen of what China is going to do, but I almost, like with my gut instinct, why on earth would you send everybody that's connected to your team over to a foreign adversary that clearly is at war with you, and just brazenly go over there with who cares? And the answer to you is confidence. Dressing up, obviously, in that outfit, going over there, bringing Pete Hegseth, the leader of this entire war machine, and they would love to get their hands on this guy. This is why they went over there. It was a warning before the truth is going to come out. So in regards to Iran, and we're going to go back there, I do speculate that there's going to be a bunch of more strikes. And like I told you before, the closer we get to regime change, the more likely it is that something is going to happen in regards to peace, in a sense that the government who rules there is not going to be working for the regime anymore. They're going to be working for the people, because everybody has been kind of killed off and slaughtered. This will then allow a change where the U.S. can go in there, take the uranium, and really the uranium is going to open up a giant can of worms. And as you know by this podcast, this giant can of worms is realistically why the rest of the Western world population, including Carney, including the leaders in Europe, etc., are starting to organize to refuse to go away. Now, in regards to Carney and everything that's happening, I'll give you an example of why I predicted something, okay? So the Marxists are all about climate change. And I told you from the beginning, it's not about climate change, and they're going to find that out in the end. Donald Trump, I speculated, I guess I told you about maybe 2 years ago, that kind of when the attack was going to happen on Canada, that it would be destabilizing Alberta, because they would want to isolate Alberta. They want to give Alberta a pipeline. They want to kind of pry Alberta away from Canada, because Canada relies on Alberta and all its money, as you know, with equalization payments, specifically Quebec. Quebec could not even function without Alberta. So in Carney has to come to give Alberta a pipeline. And like I told you before, all the Marxists, you can even Google the chatter. Why on earth is this guy doing this? Why is he giving a pipeline? It's because it's really about a war, ladies and gentlemen. And the government of Canada is going to do things that the Marxists are going to be very confused very soon as to why this is happening. Because, you know, this is not just about tree hugging. This is actually, they work for our enemies. And this is going to be something that really is a lot to wrap their minds around. So in regards to everything that's happening, is really about the bringing out of the truth, like I've told you before. The truth is going to set you free, and really is going to expose those of us inside the Western world that are working for our enemies. And this is going to make people easily be able to identify them and identify their agenda, and understand that there actually is a civilization war on us, because we do have enemies who want to conquer us. And the way that they're leading us to our slaughter is literally passing this agenda on us so that we're useless. And this has been happening for so long, ladies and gentlemen, that the average person can't even wrap their minds around it. And this is why I don't pay attention to other people's things. I know I get a lot of emails from people say, well, have you listened to this podcast? And what do you think about this idea? And what do you think about this? To be honest with you, I don't listen to any single podcast or any other information, because most people cannot wrap their minds around what is happening. So realistically, the Venezuela thing is really the next big step. It is likely worse than we think it is. What's going to happen in Cuba? Has the government of Cuba been involved in things too? This is just another kind of can of worms that it's going to continue to open, and the population is really going to start to see the entire truth. Anyways, thanks for listening. I appreciate it. Have yourself a wonderful day.